A dog hugs a vet's little boy before being put down. Then the vet realizes why and bursts into tears. What looks like a routine procedure turns into something no one in that room will ever forget. The animal refuses to let go, shaking, crying, pressing against the child's chest as if begging to say something no human can hear. Seconds later, the vet's world flips upside down. Something is horribly wrong, but not with the dog. And when the truth starts to unravel, it exposes a secret darker than anyone could imagine, one that could destroy everything this father thought he knew about life, loyalty, and love. Why did the dog do it? What hidden truth could make a grown man break down in tears in front of his own son? And when mercy becomes a matter of life and death, will he pull the syringe or his heart? I'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Type it down below, and while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the windows of Lyle's veterinary clinic, the light growing dim as another day drew to a close. The wheeled gurney squeaked through the hallway, pushed by the animal control officer who had brought in the shepherd mix for euthanasia. The dog lay quietly, resigned to whatever fate awaited him. Lyle's mind was already on his son Abel, who played contentedly in his playpen in the corner of the exam room. Being a single father meant bringing his 1-year-old to work more often than not. The baby's pale blonde curls caught the fading sunlight as he stacked colorful blocks, completely absorbed in his play. "Let's make this quick," Lyle said softly, preparing the syringe with practiced movements. The shepherd mix watched him with sad brown eyes, but remained still. These procedures were never easy, but Lyle had learned to steel himself against the emotional toll. It was part of the job. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. As Lyle approached with the syringe, the dog suddenly lurched upright, muscles tensing. Before anyone could react, he leaped from the gurney with surprising agility. Lyle's heart jumped to his throat as the large dog bounded straight toward Abel. "No!" Lyle shouted, lunging forward. But instead of attacking, the dog pressed himself against the playpen, whining urgently. His tail wagged in frantic circles as he pawed at the mesh sides, trying to reach Abel. The baby laughed, delighted by the dog's attention. But something about the animal's behavior struck Lyle as odd. This wasn't normal excitement. The dog was fixated on Abel with an almost desperate intensity, repeatedly sniffing at his chest and face. When Lyle moved to pull Abel away, the dog's whining grew more insistent. He followed, pressing his nose against the baby's torso, pawing gently but persistently at his chest. Lyle's initial fear began to shift to confusion. The dog wasn't showing any signs of aggression. If anything, he seemed deeply concerned. Years of veterinary training had taught Lyle to trust animal instincts. Something about this dog's behavior nagged at his professional intuition. He studied Abel more closely, noticing for the first time how the baby's breathing seemed slightly labored. "Hold him for a moment," Lyle instructed the officer, passing Abel over. He hurried to grab a glucose testing strip from his supplies. The dog watched intently as Lyle pricked Abel's tiny finger, collecting a small drop of blood. The numbers that appeared on the meter made his blood run cold. "Oh God," he whispered, his hands beginning to shake. The reading was dangerously high, critical levels that indicated severe diabetic ketoacidosis. How long had this been building? How had he missed the signs? There was no time for self-recrimination. "Watch the clinic," he barked at the officer, already gathering Abel into his arms. "I have to get him to the emergency room, now." The drive to the hospital was a blur of terror and guilt. Abel had grown unusually quiet, his skin clammy to the touch. Lyle's medical training warred with his parental panic as he pushed the speed limit, one hand reaching back to check his son's pulse at every stoplight. The emergency room staff responded immediately to the urgency in Lyle's voice when he burst through the doors. Soon, Abel was surrounded by medical professionals, his tiny body connected to monitors and IVs. Lyle answered their questions mechanically, his mind still struggling to process how close they'd come to disaster. Hours later, after Abel had stabilized and fallen into an exhausted sleep, Lyle found himself alone in the dim hallway outside his son's room. The weight of what had almost happened crashed over him like a physical force. His legs gave out, and he slid down the wall, landing hard on the cold linoleum floor. Hot tears spilled down his cheeks as he buried his face in his hands. He was a doctor, for heaven's sake. He should have noticed something was wrong with his own child. If it hadn't been for that dog's desperate attempt to communicate. The thought stopped him short. The dog. The same animal he'd been about to euthanize had somehow sensed what he, with all his medical training, had missed. That desperate hug, the urgent pawing, the dog had been trying to tell him that Abel was in danger. Lyle's shoulders shook with silent sobs of relief and gratitude. Through his tears, he could still see those soulful brown eyes, that determined effort to make someone understand. A dog scheduled for death had just saved his son's life. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Lyle slowly pulled himself together. His mind raced with the implications of what had happened. The dog's extraordinary sensitivity and intelligence couldn't be ignored. More than that, the timing seemed almost miraculous, if the animal hadn't been brought in at that exact moment. Lyle shuddered, unable to complete the thought. He wiped his eyes with the heel of his hand, taking deep breaths to steady himself. The night shift nurses passed by quietly, offering sympathetic smiles. They'd seen plenty of parents fall apart in these hallways. Through the window of Abel's room, Lyle could see his son's peaceful face in the soft glow of the monitors. The crisis had been averted, but the memory of how close they'd come would haunt him for a long time. The realization that he'd nearly lost Abel, his only child, his last living connection to his late wife, was almost unbearable. His hands were still trembling slightly as he pulled out his phone. He needed to call the clinic to make sure that dog wasn't going anywhere. Lyle didn't believe in coincidences anymore. That shepherd mix had been meant to come into their lives today, and Lyle intended to make sure he stayed there. The events of the afternoon played on repeat in his mind. The dog's desperate leap from the gurney, the frantic attempts to communicate, the critical glucose reading that had spurred their rush to the hospital. It was as if the universe had conspired to bring together a fragile baby, a condemned dog, and a grieving father at exactly the right moment to prevent a tragedy. Lyle leaned his head back against the wall, exhaustion settling into his bones. The guilt and fear still churned in his stomach, but alongside them now was a profound sense of gratitude. He had been given a second chance. They both had. His son would live, thanks to the extraordinary actions of a dog who had been minutes away from death himself. The irony wasn't lost on him. As a veterinarian, Lyle had always respected animals' abilities, but this went beyond anything he'd experienced. That dog hadn't just demonstrated incredible medical intuition, he'd shown a depth of caring that had quite literally saved a life. A nurse appeared with a cup of coffee, pressing it into his hands with a kind smile. Lyle accepted it gratefully, the warmth seeping into his cold fingers. Tomorrow there would be tests and specialists, and a whole new reality to face with Abel's diagnosis. But for now, in this quiet hospital hallway, Lyle simply let himself feel the full weight of what had happened, and what had almost happened. His son was alive. Against all odds, a nameless shepherd mix had sensed what no one else had noticed, and had fought desperately to make himself understood. In doing so, he had changed everything. The fluorescent lights of the clinic buzzed overhead as Lyle pushed through the front doors, his mind still reeling from the hospital. The shepherd mix waited in holding, watching him with those same knowing eyes that had recognized Abel's crisis. Romy Delaney stood by the kennel, her freckled face drawn with concern. "Dr. Whitaker, how's Abel?" she asked, twisting her braid nervously. "He's stable," Lyle answered, his voice rough with emotion. "This dog, he somehow knew Abel was in danger. He saved my son's life." Romy's face softened as she glanced at the shepherd. "I knew there was something special about him. When they brought him in, I could see it in his eyes, like he had a purpose." The dog's tail thumped against the concrete floor, and Lyle crouched down to examine him more closely. The animal's coat was matted in places but showed signs of previous care. This was no ordinary stray. The clinic's front door banged open with enough force to rattle the glass. Clint Maddox's heavy footsteps echoed through the reception area as he stormed towards them, his face flushed with anger. The county animal control director clutched a stack of papers in his meaty fist. "Where's that shepherd?" Maddox demanded, his voice bouncing off the sterile walls. "That dog needs to be put down by sundown, no exceptions." Lyle straightened, squaring his shoulders. "That's not happening. This dog just saved my son's life." Maddox's laugh was harsh and dismissive. "Saved your kid? That's rich." He slammed the papers down on the counter. "This is a dangerous animal with a prior bite history. The paperwork's all here." Romy stepped closer to the kennel, positioning herself protectively. "There has to be some mistake. He's been nothing but gentle." "The law's the law," Maddox insisted, jabbing his finger at the forms. "And I've got quotas to maintain. This dog's time is up." Lyle picked up the paperwork, scanning it with growing skepticism. Something felt off about the whole situation. "I want to do a full medical check first, including a scan for a microchip." "Waste of time," Maddox muttered, but Lyle was already retrieving the scanner. As he ran the device over the dog's shoulder area, Lyle noticed something concerning. He carefully parted the fur, revealing a small, healed scar. "Look at this," he called to Romy. "This is right where a chip would normally be placed. Someone cut it out." Romy leaned in, her eyes widening. "Who would do that? And why?" The timing was too convenient, the paperwork too neat. A dog with supposedly dangerous tendencies shows up, saves a child's life, and has evidence of a deliberately removed chip. None of it added up. "I'm filing for a temporary hold," Lyle announced, meeting Maddox's glare. "This dog's actions today merit further investigation." "You're making a mistake," Maddox growled, his face darkening. "The liability alone." "I'll take full responsibility," Lyle cut in. "But this dog deserves a chance. I owe him that much." Maddox's jaw worked as he considered. Finally, he spat out, 24 hours, not a minute more." He snatched up his papers and stormed out, muttering about quotas and paperwork. The door slammed behind him, leaving a tense silence. The shepherd mix watched them all with those intelligent eyes, as if he understood everything that had just transpired. Romy reached through the kennel bars to scratch behind his ears. "Something's not right here, Dr. Whitaker. That man seemed awful eager to see this dog put down." Lyle nodded, studying the mysterious scar again. "The question is why? And who would go to the trouble of removing a chip?" He stood up, determination settling over him. "We need to figure out where this dog really came from." "I'll help," Romy offered immediately. "We can start making calls, check missing dog reports." The shepherd pressed against the bars, letting out a soft whine. Lyle reached down to pat his head, remembering how those same paws had desperately tried to communicate Abel's distress. Whatever this dog's true story was, Lyle intended to uncover it. "First things first," he said, unlocking the kennel. "Let's get him properly examined and documented. Take photos of that scar and any other identifying marks. If someone's trying to hide this dog's identity, we need to know why." Romy nodded, already gathering supplies. The clock was ticking on their 24 hours, but Lyle felt certain they were on the right track. The mystery of the Shepherd Mix's past might lead them somewhere uncomfortable, but after what the dog had done for Abel, Lyle owed it to him to find the truth. As they began their examination, the dog remained calm and cooperative, further contradicting his supposed dangerous history. Each detail they uncovered only deepened the mystery, and Lyle's conviction that Maddox's paperwork couldn't be trusted. Time was slipping away like water through their fingers. In the clinic's examination room, Lyle watched as Romy worked with the Shepherd Mix, her movements careful and deliberate. The dog's behavior continued to surprise them both. "Come here, boy," Romy called softly, holding up a small training target. The dog immediately focused, padding over with precise steps. His eyes never left her face. "These aren't random responses," Lyle noted, jotting observations in his notebook. "Look how he positions himself." The shepherd sat perfectly aligned with Romy's left side, maintaining unwavering eye contact. When she shifted, he adjusted his position with military precision. "He reminds me of an old British detective show," Romy mused, scratching behind his ears. "Maybe we should call him Marlowe, just until we figure out his real name." The name seemed to click. The dog's ears perked up, and he tilted his head attentively. "Marlowe it is, then," Lyle agreed, smiling despite his exhaustion. He checked his watch. 18 hours left on their hold. They had transformed one of the recovery rooms into a testing area. Infant clothing borrowed from Abel's nursery lay scattered strategically around the space. Each time they introduced Marlowe to the room, his behavior followed the same pattern. "Watch this," Romy said, leading Marlowe past a onesie with trace amounts of sweat from a feverish baby. The dog immediately stopped, nose working. He gave 3 precise paw taps against the floor, then looked up at Romy expectantly. Lyle recorded the moment on his phone, adding it to their growing collection of evidence. That's the 4th time he's done that exact sequence. No aggression, no uncertainty, just clear signaling. They had tested him with various scent samples throughout the day. Blood sugar anomalies consistently triggered the most dramatic responses. Marlowe would nose-nudge their hands or legs with increasing urgency until they acknowledged the sample. The phone rang again, the 5th time in the past hour. Lyle let it go to voicemail, knowing it was probably another routine case he'd have to reschedule. The small-town clinic couldn't stop operating just because they were investigating Marlowe's mystery. "I found something interesting in these records," Romy called from the front desk, where she'd been examining the paperwork Maddox had left. She held up several photocopied pages. "The bite report is weird. Look at all these blacked-out sections." Lyle took the papers, frowning at the heavily redacted text. "This isn't standard procedure. Even confidential reports show basic details: date, location, severity. This is just empty." "And why are they all copies?" Romy pointed out. "Where are the originals?" The more they dug, the less sense it made. Lyle pulled out his phone again, recording close-ups of Marlowe's removed chip scar. The healing pattern suggested professional removal, not an accident or injury. "He's not just trained," Lyle said, watching Marlowe expertly navigate around delicate medical equipment without disturbing anything. "He's specialized. These behaviors are too specific." Another call came in. Romy answered this time, scheduling a vaccination appointment for next week. The constant interruptions emphasized how precarious their investigation was. They were running a full clinic while trying to solve this puzzle, and time was running out. "We need to document everything," Lyle insisted. setting up his tablet to record Marlowe's next interaction with their test samples. Every behavior, every response, Maddox won't be able to ignore solid evidence. They worked methodically through their remaining hours. Marlowe's reactions to medical monitors were particularly telling. He showed intense interest in devices displaying abnormal readings while ignoring those showing normal values. "Look at this," Romy called out, recording yet another clip. Marlowe had positioned himself next to an infant heart rate monitor, ears forward, body tense. When she played back a recording of irregular beats, he immediately began his alert sequence: nose nudge, paw taps, sustained eye contact. "He's not dangerous," Lyle said firmly, adding the clip to their growing folder of evidence. "He's a medical alert dog, a highly trained one." The phone rang again. This time it was a worried owner whose cat had gotten into antifreeze. Lyle had to step away, leaving Romy to continue the documentation. When he returned 30 minutes later, she had compiled everything into organized categories: behavioral responses, physical evidence, and questionable documentation. "The timing's wrong, too," she pointed out, showing him a timeline she'd sketched. "According to these papers, he was picked up as a stray 3 weeks ago, but this scar is at least 2 months old." Lyle checked his watch again. 14 hours left. Every minute felt precious now, a race against Maddox's deadline. They had to make their case bulletproof. Marlowe sat watching them, his intelligent eyes following their movements. When a baby's cry echoed from a nearby exam room, his head snapped toward the sound, body tensing in alert mode. "Run the blood sugar test again," Lyle instructed, setting up his camera. "We need multiple clear examples of his medical alert responses." They worked through another series of tests, documenting each one. Marlowe performed flawlessly, demonstrating the same precise behaviors they'd seen earlier. His reactions to various medical scenarios showed clear training patterns, nothing like the random aggression described in Maddox's paperwork. The phone kept ringing. Regular clinic life demanded attention. Lyle juggled routine appointments with their investigation, knowing they couldn't afford to lose any potential evidence. "We're missing something," he muttered, reviewing their footage late into the evening. "Why would someone go to such lengths to hide this dog's identity? And why is Maddox so determined to put him down?" Romy yawned, but kept organizing their documentation. "Whatever the reason, we've got proof now that he's not what those papers claim." They had filled 2 memory cards with video clips, taken dozens of photos, and compiled detailed behavior logs. Every interaction reinforced their conviction. Marlowe was a purpose-trained medical alert dog, not an aggressive stray. The clock on the wall ticked steadily onward. Tomorrow, Maddox would return, expecting them to comply with his order. But now they had evidence, clear, documented proof that something wasn't right about this situation. Marlowe dozed in his kennel, peaceful despite the tension around him. His presence had already saved one life. Lyle was determined not to let Maddox end his chance to save more. The afternoon sun slanted through the clinic windows when Harlan Keene's familiar truck rattled into the parking lot. Lyle checked his watch, right on time for the retired trooper's monthly medication pickup for his aging shepherd. "Doc?" Harlan nodded as he entered, his tall frame ducking slightly under the doorframe. His weathered face creased with concern when he noticed Lyle's exhausted expression. "You look like you've been wrestling with something heavy." Lyle ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Actually, I could use your eyes on something, if you've got a minute." "Got nothing but minutes these days," Harlan said, settling his worn cap more firmly on his head. "Retirement's good for that, at least." Lyle led him to the back office, where his laptop displayed the footage they'd gathered. Romy looked up from her organizing, offering a tired smile. "Remember that shepherd mix that came in yesterday?" Lyle asked, pulling up the first video clip. The one that alerted us to Abel's crisis? Harlan leaned forward, eyes sharp as he watched the footage of Marlowe's precise movements around the medical equipment. His expression grew increasingly focused with each new clip. "Hold on," he said, pointing to the screen. "Run that sequence again." Lyle replayed the clip showing Marlowe's response to the abnormal heart monitor readings. The dog's movements were measured, deliberate, nose nudge, paw tap, sustained eye contact. "Well, I'll be damned," Harlan muttered. "That's medical alert conditioning if I ever saw it. Worked with some K9 units that got similar training for detecting seizures. This boy's got all the markers, the focused attention, the repetitive signal pattern, the way he maintains contact until he gets acknowledgement." Lyle felt a surge of validation. "That's what we thought too. But look at this." He pulled out Maddox's paperwork, spreading it across the desk. "According to Animal Control, he's just an aggressive stray." Harlan's face darkened as he studied the documents. "These reports are garbage. Seen better forgeries in rookie training exercises." He tapped the redacted sections with a calloused finger. "And this kind of blanket redaction? That's not protocol. That's hiding something." "There's more," Romy added, bringing over their timeline. "The dates don't match up with his injuries, and his microchip was surgically removed." Harlan sat back, his expression grim. "Doesn't surprise me. Been hearing whispers about the county shelter for months now. Good dogs getting fast-tracked for euthanasia, especially the trained ones. Problem cases that vanish from the records completely." "But why?" Lyle asked, though a sick feeling in his gut told him he already knew. "Trained medical alert dogs can go for thousands of dollars," Harlan explained. "More if they're already proven with real saves. Lot of desperate folks out there who'd pay cash under the table to skip the years-long waiting lists." Lyle started pulling files from his cabinet, every case that had crossed paths with Animal Control in the past year. He spread them across his desk, creating a map of paperwork paths and signatures. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a pattern emerging. "Every questionable case, every rushed euthanasia order, they all route through Maddox's office." Harlan nodded slowly. "Man's been in that position 15 years. Plenty of time to build a system, figure out which papers to lose, which to push through." "But Marlowe escaped it," Romy said softly, watching the dog where he lay calmly in his kennel. "He showed us who he really is." Lyle felt the weight of that truth. The dog hadn't just saved Abel, he'd revealed something much darker lurking in their small-town systems. "What we've got here is a start," Harlan said, gesturing to their collected evidence. "But Maddox has friends in high places. You'll need more than suspicions to take him on." "We've got until sundown tomorrow," Lyle replied, determination hardening his voice. "And we've got proof that at least one of his dangerous dogs is actually a trained medical professional." Harlan stood, adjusting his cap again. "I'll make some calls. Still know a few folks who care more about right and wrong than political convenience." He paused at the door. "Watch yourself, Doc. Men like Maddox don't like their systems questioned." After Harlan left, Lyle stared at the spread of papers before him. Each file represented a dog that might have been more than it seemed, each signature a possible link in a chain of corruption. "We're not giving up," Romy said firmly, her hand gentle on his shoulder. "Marlowe trusted us. We have to trust what we know is right." Lyle nodded, drawing strength from her steady conviction. They had hours left before Maddox's deadline, and every minute would count. He began methodically documenting the patterns in the paperwork, building their case piece by piece. Marlowe watched them from his kennel, his intelligent eyes reflecting the late afternoon light. He'd shown them his true purpose once by saving Abel. Now it was their turn to save him by proving what he really was. Not a danger, but a guardian. trained to protect and alert, worthy of life and purpose. "We'll find a way," Lyle promised, both to himself and the dog watching him with such trust. "Whatever it takes, we'll find a way to prove who you really are." The setting sun cast long shadows through the clinic windows as they continued their work, racing against time to uncover enough evidence to challenge Maddox's authority and save a dog who had already proven his worth in the most meaningful way possible, by saving a child's life. Night settled over the small town like a heavy blanket. Inside the clinic, Lyle rubbed his tired eyes, still poring over documents at his desk. The quiet was broken only by Marlowe's steady breathing from his kennel and the soft whir of the baby monitor carrying Abel's peaceful snores from the apartment upstairs. A sharp crack shattered the silence. Lyle's head snapped up at the sound of breaking glass. Before he could move, multiple alarms shrieked to life, their piercing wails echoing through the building. His heart lurched as heavy footsteps pounded through the lobby. Through the office window, he caught glimpses of dark figures in ski masks. The acrid smell of gasoline hit his nostrils as liquid splashed against walls and floors. A whoosh of orange flame roared up the stairwell, cutting off direct access to the apartment where Abel slept. "No!" Lyle lunged for the stairs, but intense heat drove him back. Smoke began pouring through the building, thick and choking. The stairwell was acting like a chimney, drawing the flames upward toward his son. Marlowe erupted from his kennel with explosive force, the door flying open. Instead of running from the fire, he charged straight at Lyle, ramming his shoulder against his legs until he stumbled backward. The dog's eyes were intense, focused. "Abel," Lyle gasped through the thickening smoke. "We have to get to Abel," Marlowe barked once, sharp and commanding, then took off down a side hallway. When Lyle hesitated, the dog returned, grabbing his sleeve with gentle but insistent teeth, tugging him along. The utility corridor was narrow and rarely used, packed with cleaning supplies and old equipment. Marlowe navigated it with purpose, nudging aside obstacles. The smoke was less dense here, though Lyle's lungs still burned with every breath. They climbed past the mechanical room, up a tight service stairway Lyle had almost forgotten existed. The dog shouldered through a maintenance door, emerging into the upstairs hallway far from the worst of the flames. Lyle rushed to Abel's room, scooping up his sleeping son. The baby stirred but didn't wake, his breathing steady despite the smoke. "Down!" Lyle commanded, following Marlowe's lead back through the service passage. The air grew thicker, darker. Lyle pressed Abel's face against his chest, trying to shield him from the worst of it. His own vision blurred, legs weakening as oxygen grew scarce. Just when he thought they wouldn't make it, strong hands grabbed him, dragging him the final few feet. Clean night air hit his lungs like a shock of cold water. "I've got you, Doc," Harlan's gruff voice came through the haze. The retired trooper helped Lyle onto the lawn, where Romy waited with a blanket. "Abel?" Lyle choked out. "He's perfect," Romy assured him, checking the baby's breathing. "Not even a cough." Marlowe emerged last, fur singed but tail high, taking up guard position beside them as fire trucks screamed into the parking lot. Red and blue lights painted the scene in surreal colors as crews attacked the blaze with powerful hoses. "I called Harlan as soon as I saw the truck," Romy explained, her face streaked with soot. "It looked wrong, just sitting there with its lights off." Security cameras, Lyle remembered suddenly. The clinic system backed up to a remote server, something he'd installed after a break-in last year. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands, accessing the footage. The video was grainy, but clear enough. 3 masked figures, professional movements, a dark pickup truck. As it turned to leave, the camera caught a partial plate. "Got you," Harlan growled, already dialing on his own phone. I know people who can run that plate quietly. Within minutes, his contact confirmed what they'd suspected. The truck was registered to Mike Dawson, Clint Maddox's cousin and occasional contractor for the county. This wasn't random, Lyle said, watching firefighters douse the last of the flames. The clinic's ground floor was scorched but intact. The apartment had suffered mostly smoke damage. They tried to destroy evidence and silence us. Marlowe pressed against his leg, a solid warmth in the chaos. Twice now, this dangerous dog had saved both Lyle and Abel. The irony wasn't lost on him. We need to move fast, Harlan advised, his expression grim. Maddox just showed his hand and his desperation. But now we've got proof he's willing to commit arson and attempted murder to keep his secrets. Lyle looked down at his sleeping son, then at the dog who'd guided them to safety. Everything had changed tonight. This wasn't just about saving one dog anymore. It was about exposing a corruption that had already proven deadly. Document everything, Harlan continued. The plate, the footage, the accelerant patterns. I'll call in some favors, get fire investigation involved. Maddox isn't walking away from this one. Romy hugged Marlowe close, her eyes fierce. No one's going to hurt you again, she promised him. We won't let them. As emergency crews secured the scene, Lyle held Abel tight, watching Marlowe maintain his protective vigil. The dog's true nature couldn't have been clearer, not a threat to be destroyed, but a guardian who'd risked everything to save those in his care. The evidence of that truth was written in smoke and flame, captured on camera, and burned into Lyle's grateful heart. Dawn was breaking over the smoldering clinic when Lyle finally sat down at his laptop, hand still trembling slightly from adrenaline and exhaustion. The acrid smell of smoke clung to his clothes as he uploaded the security footage to a secure cloud drive. With determined clicks, he forwarded everything to the state attorney general's office: the video, photos of the license plate, and a detailed timeline of events leading up to the arson. They need to see this right away, Harlan said, standing behind Lyle's chair. They'd set up a temporary command center in Harlan's living room, where Abel slept peacefully in a borrowed portable crib. I've got some contacts in the AG's office who'll make sure it doesn't get buried. Marlowe lay alert by the front door, his ears pricking at every sound from outside. The dog hadn't relaxed his guard since they'd left the clinic, as if sensing the danger wasn't over. Romy paced nearby, still wired from the night's events. What about protection? Maddox knows where you live, where you work, where everyone involved lives. Already on it, Harlan replied, holding up his phone. Called in some favors with the state police. They're sending a detail within the hour. Nobody's getting near any of us without going through them first. Lyle rubbed his tired eyes, then turned his attention to Marlowe. Something had been nagging at him since the rescue. The way the dog had known exactly where to go, how to lead them to safety. This wasn't just instinct. This was training, precise and purposeful. Romy, can you help me check him over? There might be something we missed. She nodded, coaxing Marlowe to lie down. Together they carefully examined the dog's singed coat, looking for any signs of injury or clues. Lyle's hands moved methodically, parting the thick fur. Wait, he said suddenly, fingers pausing on Marlowe's inner thigh. Look at this. Beneath the fur was a small, faded blue mark, a tattoo of numbers and letters, the kind used to track surgical procedures or medical studies. Time had blurred it, but most of it was still readable. EK-417, Lyle read aloud. This isn't a standard shelter ID. Harlan leaned in closer. EK could be initials. Let me run it through the system. While Harlan worked his contacts, Lyle and Romy continued documenting everything about Marlowe, his reactions to medical equipment, his behavior patterns, the way he constantly monitored Abel's breathing. Got something, Harlan announced after 20 minutes on the phone. EK matches to an Evangeline Kerr. She was a nurse at County General, ran a volunteer program training shelter dogs for medical alert work, specialized in neonatal cases, apnea, blood sugar monitoring, that sort of thing. Was? Lyle asked, catching the past tense. Harlan's expression darkened. She disappeared 3 months ago after a hit and run. Never found the driver. Case is still open. Right when Marlowe showed up in the system as a dangerous dog, Romy said quietly. Lyle was already pulling up county records, cross-referencing dates. Look at this. In the 6 months before Kerr's accident, 12 dogs were listed as rehomed through Maddox's department. All shepherd or retriever mixes, all with prior training notes. All gone without a trace, Harlan added grimly. Want to bet they matched Kerr's program profile? The pieces were falling into place. Marlowe wasn't just one wrongly labeled dog. He was part of a pattern, a systematic dismantling of a program that had been saving lives. Evangeline Kerr was onto something, Lyle said, studying the dates. These weren't random disposals. Someone was deliberately targeting her trained dogs, erasing them from the system. When she started asking questions, she had an accident, Romy finished, her voice hard. Marlowe whined softly, pressing his nose against Lyle's hand. The dog's intelligence seemed even more pronounced now, weighted with purpose and training that someone had tried to delete. We need to find her, Lyle decided. If she's alive, she's the key to exposing all of this. Her testimony would prove Marlowe's real background and blow Maddox's operation wide open. I'll put out some quiet feelers, Harlan said. Someone that's skilled doesn't just vanish completely. There might be a trail we can follow. Romy was already compiling the records they'd found. The timing of everything is too perfect. The hit and run, the dogs disappearing, Marlowe being labeled dangerous right when he could have exposed the whole thing. And now arson, Lyle added, glancing at Abel sleeping peacefully nearby. They're willing to kill to keep this quiet. The question is why? What makes these dogs so valuable that someone would go to these lengths? Money, Harlan suggested. Trained medical alert dogs are worth thousands. If someone's been selling them off instead of actually rehoming them. Or they're covering up something bigger, Romy said. Something about the program itself. Lyle watched Marlowe, noting how the dog's attention never wavered from Abel for long. The level of training, the precision of his alerts. This was more than just basic conditioning. Evangeline Kerr had developed something special, something worth protecting. Or stealing. The morning sun was streaming through the windows now, highlighting the exhaustion on everyone's faces. But there was determination there too. They had names, dates, connections, real evidence of corruption that went beyond one falsely accused dog. A car pulled up outside, and Marlowe tensed. Harlan checked through the window, then relaxed. State Police, our protection details here. Lyle nodded, gathering Abel into his arms. The baby stirred, but settled quickly, one tiny hand gripping his father's shirt. Marlowe moved to stand beside them, a guardian still faithful to his training despite everything that had been done to him. We'll find her, Romy said softly, her hand resting on Marlowe's head. We'll prove what you really are. The dog's dark eyes seemed to hold wisdom beyond simple animal intelligence, the knowledge of his purpose, and the patience to see it fulfilled. Whatever Evangeline Kerr had created in her program, its truth was standing right here, proven in saved lives and unwavering loyalty. Now they just had to follow the trail she'd left behind, before those trying to bury it could strike again. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the clinic's temporary office space, as Lyle spread a stack of papers across his makeshift desk. His eyes burned from hours of reading, but determination kept him focused. Next to him, Marlowe lay alert, his ears pricking at every small sound. I think we've got something, Romy said, hurrying in with a fresh batch of documents. Her face was flushed with excitement. "I reached out to some of Evangeline's old colleagues at County General. They've been holding on to her research notes." Lyle straightened, instantly alert. "They trusted you with those?" "Once I explained about Marlowe and showed them the footage of him with Abel." She smiled. "Let's just say there are people who want the truth to come out." They spread the new papers alongside their existing evidence. Evangeline's neat handwriting filled page after page, detailing her program's methodology and results. Photos showed dogs in training, each wearing specialized vests and working with infants under careful supervision. "Look at this," Lyle said, pointing to a particular section. She was specifically training dogs to detect blood sugar fluctuations and breathing irregularities in newborns, exactly what Marlowe picked up with Abel. Romy nodded, pulling out another document. "And here's the roster of her most successful trainees." "Third one, down." "Marlowe," Lyle breathed, tracing the name with his finger. The photo showed a younger version of their shepherd mix, proudly wearing his medical alert vest. One of her star pupils, according to these notes, completed over 1,000 hours of specialized training. Marlowe's tail thumped against the floor at the sound of his name. His eyes, wise and patient, seemed to hold secrets they were only now beginning to understand. "But this is what really caught my attention," Romy continued, pulling out a series of official-looking forms. "I compared Evangeline's records with the county's documentation of Marlowe's supposed attack. The dates don't match up. According to her logs, he was still in active service when the incident supposedly occurred." Lyle frowned, studying the paperwork. "The attack report, it's too clean. No witness statements, no medical records, just a basic form with Maddox's signature." "Exactly. And look at this." Romy pointed to a notation in Evangeline's training log. The day before he was labeled dangerous, Marlowe was actually performing a demonstration at a pediatric ward. The pieces were falling into place with devastating clarity. Lyle thought back to that first day, when Marlowe had broken free of the gurney. He hadn't been attacking Abel. He'd been doing exactly what he was trained to do. "He was never dangerous," Lyle said softly. "Every time he approached a child, he was trying to help, but without his medical alert vest, without anyone understanding his training." "He looked like an aggressive dog," Romy finished, "and someone took advantage of that perception. They cut out his identifying chip, erased his history, and made sure he'd be seen as a threat." Marlowe rose and padded over to Abel's portable crib, where the baby was napping peacefully. The dog's movements were precise, professional, every inch the trained medical assistant they now knew him to be. The implications here. Lyle ran a hand through his hair, overwhelmed by the scope of what they were uncovering. "This isn't just about one dog. If they did this to Marlowe, they could have done it to dozens of others," Romy said grimly. "Highly trained medical alert dogs, each worth thousands of dollars, each capable of saving lives, all disappeared into the system." Lyle started pacing, his mind racing. "We need to track the others. Every dog that went through Evangeline's program, every one that was later labeled as dangerous or disappeared through Maddox's office." "Already working on it?" Romy pulled up a spreadsheet on her laptop. "I've identified 15 possible matches so far, all with similar patterns: sudden behavior complaints, missing chips, fast-tracked euthanasia orders." "A pipeline," Lyle muttered. "They're systematically burying these dogs, erasing their training, their purpose." He stopped suddenly, a horrible thought striking him. What if they're not just destroying them? What if they're selling them? Reselling. Trained medical alert dogs? Romy considered it. The market for them is huge. The waiting lists are years long, and the training costs are enormous. And if you could get them for free, relabel them as rescues. Lyle's voice hardened. You could make a fortune. All it would take is the right position in animal control, the ability to manipulate records. Marlowe whined softly, drawing their attention. The dog had moved to the window, his posture alert but not alarmed. A moment later, they heard Harlan's truck pulling up outside. The retired trooper entered carrying another box of files. "Got everything I could find on similar cases in neighboring counties," he said. "Pattern holds up. Trained dogs vanishing, paperwork inconsistencies, all tied to facilities where Maddox has connections." "We've found proof of Marlowe's real background," Romy told him, quickly summarizing their discoveries. Harlan nodded grimly. "Makes sense. I've been doing some digging into financial records. There's a chain of private sales, all just under the reporting threshold, all linking back to shell companies. Someone's been moving a lot of dogs through unofficial channels. And when Evangeline started noticing her trained dogs disappearing, Lyle began. She became a threat, Harlan finished, one that needed to be eliminated. They all looked at Marlowe, who had returned to his vigilant position near Abel. The dog's true identity was now clear. Not a danger, but a guardian. Not a mistake to be erased, but a highly trained professional who had stayed true to his purpose despite everything. "This changes everything," Lyle said quietly. "We're not just fighting to save one dog anymore. We're looking at systematic corruption, theft, maybe even attempted murder." "We need to move carefully," Harlan warned. "These people have already shown they're willing to use violence to protect their operation." "But we have proof now," Romy insisted, gesturing to their growing collection of evidence. "Evangeline's records, the financial trails, Marlowe himself. And somewhere out there, Evangeline Kerr is still alive," Lyle added. "She has to be. She's the only one who can testify to exactly what her program accomplished and how it was dismantled." Marlowe's ears perked up at Evangeline's name, his tail giving a small wag of recognition. Even after months, he remembered his trainer, another piece of evidence pointing to his sophisticated training and true nature. The sun was setting outside, casting the room in deep orange light. They had started this day looking for answers about one dog's identity. Instead, they had uncovered a web of corruption that had buried dozens of life-saving animals, silenced a dedicated nurse, and nearly cost Lyle his son. Looking at Marlowe now, Lyle saw not just Abel's savior, but a key to exposing a system that had betrayed its purpose. Every alert, every gentle interaction with Abel was proof of training that someone had tried to erase. But truth, like instinct, ran deeper than paperwork. Marlowe had never forgotten his real mission, and now neither would they. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps as Lyle climbed them, manila folder tucked under his arm. His footsteps echoed in the empty corridor as he made his way to the clerk's office. Inside the folder lay their best chance at keeping Marlowe alive, a carefully crafted injunction request and temporary foster application. The clerk, a thin woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, took the papers with practiced efficiency. "Emergency injunction against euthanasia," she murmured, scanning the documents. "And fostering papers for—" She glanced up. "The same animal?" "Yes," Lyle replied firmly. "We have evidence that the dangerous dog classification was falsified, and the animal has demonstrated clear medical alert training." She stamped the papers, her movements precise and methodical. "Judge Harrison is hearing emergency petitions this morning. Second floor, room 212. 2 hours later, Lyle emerged with signed orders. The temporary injunction would prevent Maddox from moving forward with euthanasia while they gathered more evidence, and the foster agreement placed Marlowe legally under Lyle's care. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it bought them precious time. Back at the clinic, Romy had transformed one of the recovery rooms into what she called their war room. Papers covered every surface, carefully organized into color-coded folders. She looked up as Lyle entered, her eyes bright with determination. "Got it," he said, holding up the court orders. "Marlowe's officially under our protection now." Romy's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Thank goodness. I've been documenting everything, every interaction, every alert behavior, timestamps, witnesses. Harlan stopped by earlier and showed me how to maintain proper chain of custody for the evidence." "Smart," Lyle nodded. "The AG's office is particularly interested in the financial records Harlan uncovered. They're sending an investigator next week." They worked through the afternoon, building their case piece by piece. Romy had created detailed logs of Marlowe's interactions with Abel, highlighting the dog's consistent medical alert responses. Security camera footage showed his gentle demeanor with other patients. Every document was carefully dated, annotated, and backed up both digitally and in hard copy. The sun had set by the time Lyle left the clinic. The parking lot was poorly lit, shadows gathering between the few scattered cars. He was halfway to his truck when he heard footsteps behind him. "Dr. Whitaker." Maddox's voice was quiet but carried clearly in the still evening air. "Quite the legal maneuver you pulled today." Lyle turned slowly, maintaining a careful distance between them. Maddox stood with his hands in his pockets, his bulk casting a long shadow in the dim light. "Just following proper procedures," Lyle replied, evenly. "Everything by the book." Maddox took a step closer, his face half hidden in shadow. "Books can burn, Doctor. Files can disappear. Accidents happen all the time. To people, to pets." His voice dropped lower. "Even to babies." The threat hung in the air between them, cold and explicit. Lyle's hands clenched at his sides, but he kept his voice steady. "Are you threatening my son, Director Maddox?" "Threatening." Maddox's laugh was hollow. "I'm simply pointing out how dangerous the world can be, especially for those who don't mind their own business." He moved closer, close enough that Lyle could smell stale tobacco on his breath. "That clinic fire was unfortunate. Would be a shame if next time someone got hurt." Every paternal instinct in Lyle's body screamed at him to react, to strike out at this man threatening his child. Instead, he held Maddox's gaze and said quietly, "Everything you just said is on camera, and the feed goes straight to my security service. Would you like to rephrase any of it for the record?" Maddox's face tightened, but he stepped back. "Just having a friendly conversation about safety, Doctor. Think about it." He turned and walked away, his footsteps fading into the darkness. Lyle waited until Maddox's car had disappeared before letting out a shaky breath. The threat wasn't just implied anymore. It was real, immediate, and aimed at what he loved most. He pulled out his phone. "Harlan? I need some advice about upgrading security. Yes, right now. Maddox just made things personal." The next morning found the clinic transformed. New security cameras covered every angle of the building and parking lot. Reinforced locks had been installed on all doors. A sophisticated monitoring system tracked movement throughout the facility. Harlan had called in favors, and the installations had been completed overnight. "Motion sensors here and here," Harlan explained, pointing to a diagram. "Silent alarm tied directly to police dispatch, and I've got some friends keeping an eye on things." Lyle nodded, bouncing Abel gently in his arms. The baby was wearing a continuous glucose monitor now, its small sensor a constant reminder of how close they'd come to tragedy. Marlowe lay at their feet, alert but relaxed, his eyes tracking every movement. "We're not taking any chances," Romy added, updating their security protocols. "All client appointments are being screened. No one gets in without verification." They had moved Abel's crib into Lyle's office, where it could be monitored at all times. Marlowe had taken up permanent residence beside it, his protective instincts now officially sanctioned by the foster agreement. "The AG's office called," Harlan said. "They're expediting the investigation based on the new evidence. Maddox's threats just added another layer to their case." Lyle looked down at his son, then at Marlowe. The dog met his gaze steadily, unwavering in his dedication. This wasn't just about exposing corruption anymore. It was about protecting family, both human and canine. "We keep going," he said firmly. "We document everything. We follow every lead. We build our case. But we do it smart, and we do it safe." Romy nodded, adding another file to their growing collection. "Maddox just showed his hand. He's scared, and scared people make mistakes." "Let him," Harlan growled. "Every threat, every attempt at intimidation, it all goes in the file. He's digging his own grave." They worked through the morning, strengthening their defenses while building their case. The clinic hummed with purpose, every person aware of the stakes. This was no longer just a fight about one dog or one corrupt official. It was about standing up to systemic abuse, about protecting the vulnerable, whether they walked on 2 legs or 4. Abel babbled happily in his playpen, reaching for Marlowe's tail. The dog remained still, letting tiny fingers grasp his fur while keeping his traditional alert posture. His presence was both guardian and proof, living evidence of the truth they were fighting to expose. The morning sun filtered through reinforced windows, casting warm light on their work. They were ready for whatever came next. Maddox had meant to frighten them into submission, but his threats had only strengthened their resolve. The fight had teeth now, and they were prepared to bite back. The morning dawned crisp and clear as a line of black SUVs rolled into the county animal control parking lot. Lyle watched from his clinic window as men and women in dark jackets emerged, their badges catching the early light. State investigators moved with practiced efficiency, fanning out across the facility. Through his binoculars, Lyle could see Maddox's face drain of color as he met them at the entrance. The director's usual swagger disappeared as an investigator presented him with a thick stack of papers. "Search warrant," Harlan commented from beside Lyle, his voice gruff with satisfaction. "They're going in hard." Inside the clinic, Romy kept Marlowe close, while Abel napped in his secured playpen. The dog's ears perked at every sound, but he remained steady at his post. They had all learned to balance vigilance with patience. "Look at that," Lyle murmured, watching teams of investigators wheel out cart after cart of files. "They're taking everything." Digital cameras flashed as agents documented the holding areas. Every kennel, every feeding station, every corner where a scared animal might have huddled, all photographed and logged. Other investigators moved through the offices, their evidence bags filling with papers and hard drives. Harlan's police scanner crackled with activity. "They're finding irregularities already. A lot of talk about missing paperwork and altered dates." A young investigator emerged from the building, waving urgently to her superior. She held up a laptop, pointing to something on the screen. More agents clustered around, their expressions hardening as they viewed whatever she had found. "That's it," Harlan said softly. "That's the smoking gun." The next few moments unfolded like a slow-motion film. 2 deputies approached Maddox, who had been standing frozen by his office door. Words were exchanged. Maddox's face twisted from shock to rage. When the deputies reached for their handcuffs, he tried to bolt. He didn't get far. The deputies caught him before he cleared the parking lot, taking him down with practiced efficiency. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed across the morning air. "Director Clinton Maddox," one deputy announced clearly, "you're under arrest for suspected arson and tampering with evidence. You have the right to remain silent." Lyle watched as they led Maddox to a waiting patrol car. The director's perfectly pressed suit was now dirty and rumpled, his carefully maintained image crumbling with each step. Should we celebrate? Romy asked quietly, joining them at the window. She held Abel, who had woken from his nap, and was contentedly playing with her hair. Lyle started to smile, then caught himself. Something felt off. It's too clean, he said slowly. Too neat. Harlan nodded, his weathered face serious. Corrupt officials like Maddox, they usually have insurance, friends in high places, backup plans. And connections we don't know about, Romy added, instinctively holding Abel closer. Marlowe padded over to them, his nails clicking softly on the floor. He pressed against Lyle's leg, as if lending support to their caution. We keep everything locked down, Lyle decided. All security measures stay in place, all protocols active. Harlan pulled out his phone and set it on the desk, screen up. I'll keep my contacts on alert. Any unusual movement around town, we'll know. They watched as the investigators continued their work, methodically documenting years of deception. Evidence bags filled with papers that might reveal how many dogs like Marlowe had been erased, how many trained animals had vanished into a system designed to hide them. Look at this, Romy said, pointing to her tablet. She had been monitoring local news feeds. They're citing the clinic fire as part of the arrest, connecting it to evidence tampering. Lyle read over her shoulder. The article mentioned suspicious patterns of animal disposal and falsified danger classifications. His own name appeared as a witness who had helped break the case. They'll want statements, Harlan warned. From all of us, stick to the facts, no speculation. Through the window, they could see reporters arriving, drawn by the police activity. Camera crews set up their equipment while journalists checked their phones, hungry for details. We stay quiet, Lyle said firmly. Let the investigation run its course. Abel and Marlowe stay inside our security perimeter. As if in agreement, Marlowe moved to sit between them and the window, his pose alert but calm. Abel reached down from Romy's arms, patting the dog's head with clumsy affection. The morning wore on. They watched the methodical collection of evidence, the careful documentation of years of corruption. Investigators interviewed staff members, their notepads filling with testimonies of suspicious practices and missing records. Look who's here, Harlan said suddenly, nodding toward a familiar figure stepping out of an unmarked car. It was Detective Sarah Chen from the State Attorney General's office. She had been their main contact throughout the investigation, collecting their evidence and coordinating with other agencies. Her presence suggested this was more than a local operation. She's good at her job, Harlan commented. Thorough, but even she knows this isn't over. They watched as Chen directed her team, pointing out areas to search, people to interview. Her efficiency was impressive, but there was a tension in her movements that matched their own unease. Inside the clinic, they maintained their routine. Patients were seen, animals were treated, prescriptions filled. But every door stayed locked, every security camera remained active. Marlowe alternated between guarding Abel and patrolling their perimeter, his training evident in every precise movement. I keep thinking about Evangeline, Romy said softly, organizing files at her desk. If Maddox was willing to go this far to cover his tracks. She didn't need to finish the thought. They all knew the stakes. The missing nurse's fate was a shadow over their apparent victory, a reminder of what they were really fighting against. We document everything, Lyle repeated, his new mantra. We stay alert. We protect what matters. Abel babbled happily from his playpen, oblivious to the tension around him. Marlowe lay nearby, his eyes never leaving his charge. The dog's dedication was both comforting and sobering, a reminder of how much remained at stake. Through the window, they could see Maddox's patrol car pulling away, followed by SUVs loaded with evidence. The morning's drama was ending, but they all felt it. This was just the beginning. We'll need to be ready, Harlan said, his phone still prominently placed on the desk. For whatever comes next. Lyle looked at his son, at Marlowe, at his makeshift family of allies. They had won this round, but victory felt fragile, like spring ice over deep water. They would celebrate later, perhaps. For now, they would watch and wait and keep their guard up. The sun climbed higher, casting their shadows long across the clinic floor. Outside, the last investigators packed up their gear, leaving behind an emptied animal control office and 1,000 unanswered questions. The real work was just beginning. The celebration died before sunset. Lyle was driving home from the pharmacy, Abel securely fastened in his car seat, when his phone buzzed with Romy's frantic message. Emergency. Marlowe's transport intercepted. 3 men, white pickup, headed east on County Road 12. His heart dropped. They had been transferring Marlowe to a secure kennel facility while the investigation continued. The timing had been confidential, which meant someone on the inside had leaked it. The next text made his blood run cold. Maddox made bail, $20,000 cash. Lyle pulled into a gas station, mind racing. He needed to alert Detective Chen, needed to get Abel somewhere safe, needed to... His phone rang. Unknown number. Dr. Whitaker. Maddox's voice was silk over steel. Beautiful evening for a drive, isn't it? Especially out by the old Thompson quarry. You know the place? Lyle's fingers tightened on the steering wheel. Where's my dog? Your dog? Maddox chuckled. Interesting claim, given the paperwork. But he's here, waiting, along with some friends who are very interested in discussing your evidence collection habits. Bring everything, drives, papers, phone backups, and bring that precious baby boy of yours. Leave Abel out of this. Can't do that, Doc. Need insurance, you'll behave. 45 minutes, come alone, or Marlowe takes a long walk off a short cliff. Oh, and don't bother calling your friends at the AG's office. Cell reception out here is terrible. The line went dead. Lyle looked back at Abel, peacefully dozing. The setting sun painted his pale curls gold, so like his mother's. The same curls he'd been stroking when they lost her, when he'd promised to keep their son safe no matter what. With trembling fingers, he typed a message to Romy. Working late. Check clinic security feeds. It was their code for trouble. She would understand. He pulled up his location tracking app and made sure it was running, then tucked the phone into Abel's diaper bag where it wouldn't be immediately visible. A digital breadcrumb, he hoped, though Maddox's warning about reception worried him. The drive to Thompson Quarry took 38 minutes. Each turn of the wheels felt like signing his own death warrant. But what choice did he have? The quarry emerged from the twilight like an open wound in the earth. Sheer rock faces, deep pits, rusted equipment standing like forgotten sentinels. 3 vehicles waited near the edge. Maddox's personal truck, the white pickup Romy had described, and a dark SUV. 6 men stood in a loose circle, Marlowe held between them on a chain. The dog's eyes locked onto Abel immediately, his posture rigid with protective intensity. Right on time, Maddox called out as Lyle parked. Bring the kid and come join our little policy discussion. Lyle lifted Abel from his car seat, cradling him close. The wind whipped around them, cold and sharp with autumn's edge. It carried the scent of dust and old diesel, along with something else, something sickly sweet that made his veterinary instincts prickle. He approached slowly, cataloging faces and positions. 2 men he recognized as Maddox's cousins, known for running protection rackets. The others were probably hired muscle, but they moved with purpose. This wasn't their first discussion. The evidence, Maddox said, extending his hand. All of it. It's too late, Lyle replied. The AG's office has everything. Copies, originals, Witness statements. Then you'll sign a statement of your own, recanting everything, claiming you falsified records to frame me because of a personal grudge. Your signature, your confession tonight." Abel stirred in Lyle's arms, making a soft sound of distress. The sound made Marlowe strain against his chain, nostrils flaring. The dog's behavior triggered something in Lyle's memory, that same urgent focus from the clinic. "He's getting warm," Lyle said, touching Abel's forehead. "I need his bag." "Check it first," Maddox ordered one of his men. The thug roughly dumped the contents onto a flat rock. Diapers, wipes, formula, and Lyle's phone, screen dark. Maddox's face darkened. "I thought I said come alone." He nodded to one of his cousins, who smashed the phone with his boot heel. But Lyle wasn't watching the phone anymore. He was watching Marlowe, seeing the dog's increasing agitation. The wind shifted again, carrying that sweet smell stronger now. Ketones. Abel's breath was turning sugary, his blood sugar dropping dangerously fast. "He needs his medicine," Lyle said, real fear creeping into his voice. "Right now." "Sign first," Maddox countered. "Then everyone goes home safe." Marlowe barked sharply, pulling hard enough that two men had to hold his chain. The dog's training was crystal clear. He sensed Abel's crisis building. Time was running out in more ways than one. A distant engine sound caught Lyle's attention, but he forced himself not to react. Instead, he looked directly at Maddox. "You want to add a dead baby to your charges? Because that's what you'll have in about 10 minutes without his insulin." Maddox's jaw clenched. "The papers first, then the kid gets his shot." "No time," Lyle snapped, feeling Abel's skin grow clammy. "Unless you want to explain to a jury how you forced a father to watch his infant die, even your connections couldn't bury that." The moment stretched taut as a wire. Then Maddox nodded curtly. "Get it, quickly." Lyle turned toward his car, mind racing. The engine sound was closer now, multiple vehicles approaching fast. He just had to keep them all distracted for a few more minutes. He reached his car and carefully laid Abel on the back seat, hands shaking as he prepared the insulin injection. The sweet smell was overwhelming now. Too long without monitoring, too much stress on his tiny system. "Hurry up, Doc," Maddox called. "We've got paperwork waiting." The headlights appeared at the quarry entrance just as Lyle administered the insulin. 3 police cruisers and an unmarked car, lights flashing and sirens screaming to life. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Maddox's men scattering, Marlowe breaking free in the chaos, Detective Chen's voice on a megaphone ordering everyone to freeze. Lyle clutched Abel to his chest, shielding him as flashlights and weapons crisscrossed the darkening quarry. Someone fired a shot. The sound echoed off the rock walls like thunder. Marlowe launched himself at the nearest threat to Abel, Maddox himself, reaching for something in his jacket. Dog and man went down hard on the gravel. The scene dissolved into shouts and running feet, and the sharp commands of officers securing the site. Through it all, Lyle focused only on Abel's breathing, counting the seconds until the insulin would take effect, praying they hadn't cut it too close this time. A familiar hand touched his shoulder. Romy, eyes wide with worry. The security cameras caught them taking Marlowe. Harlan called his old contacts the minute I raised the alarm. "Are you okay? Is Abel?" "He'll be all right," Lyle said, feeling his son's temperature already starting to normalize. "Thanks to Marlowe." Again. They watched as Detective Chen personally cuffed Maddox, reading him his rights while blood trickled from the bite on his arm. The former director's face was a mask of fury as he was led away, his empire of corruption crumbling around him. Marlowe padded over to them, head high, every inch the guardian he was trained to be. He pressed his nose gently against Abel's leg, then sat at attention, waiting for his next command. The wind still scoured the quarry, but its bite seemed less fierce now. Red and blue lights painted the rock walls like stained glass, transforming the place of intended tragedy into something almost beautiful, almost like justice. The quarry air grew sharp with tension as Abel slumped in Lyle's arms, his small body going frighteningly still. Lyle's heart lurched as he recognized the signs: pale skin, cold sweat, the sickly sweet smell of ketones on his son's breath. "Something's wrong with him," Lyle called out, his voice tight with controlled panic. "I need to check his blood sugar." "No one moves," Maddox barked, gesturing with his flashlight. The beam caught Abel's slack face in its harsh glare. But Marlowe had already sensed the crisis. With a sudden surge of desperate strength, the shepherd mix yanked free from his handler's grip. The chain clattered against rocks as he bounded to Abel's side, ignoring the shouts and threats around him. "Get that mutt back," Maddox ordered, but his men hesitated, unsure whether to approach the intensely focused dog. Marlowe pressed his nose urgently against Abel's chest, then lifted his paw to tap repeatedly at the baby's ribs. The dog's movements were precise, almost mechanical in their trained purpose, the same alert pattern he'd shown that first day at the clinic. When Abel didn't respond, Marlowe's whines took on a keening edge. "He's crashing," Lyle said, his clinical training warring with parental terror. "His glucose is bottoming out. I need my kit right now, or he could have seizures." Maddox's laugh was ugly in the gathering dusk. "Touching. But I've got bigger problems than one sick kid. Maybe it's nature's way of cleaning up loose ends?" "You heartless!" Lyle bit back the rest, forcing himself to think past his rage. His medical bag was in his car, less than 15 feet away. Next to it, wrapped in a blanket, was the tranquilizer gun he used for large animal emergencies. If he could just reach it. "Look," he said, raising his hands slowly. "Whatever happens here, you don't want a dead infant on your conscience. Let me get his insulin. Please." Marlowe's nudging grew more frantic, his whines rising in pitch. The dog's behavior was drawing everyone's attention, exactly what Lyle needed. He took one careful step toward the car, then another. A faint electronic chirp cut through the tension. Romy's message receipt, right on schedule. Somewhere on the dark roads below, Harlan would be following that digital breadcrumb straight to them. But would help arrive in time? "I said nobody moves!" Maddox swung his flashlight beam back to Lyle, who froze mid-step. "He's dying." Lyle's composure finally cracked. "Are you really going to stand there and watch a baby die? What's that going to do to your plea deal?" Abel's breathing had grown shallow, his skin taking on a grayish tinge that set off every medical alarm in Lyle's training. Marlowe's alerts were now constant, almost frenzied, nose to chest, paw to ribs, over and over with machine-like persistence. A flicker of movement caught Lyle's eye, distant headlights cresting the quarry's ridge. Help was coming, but Abel might not have those precious minutes left. "Last chance," Maddox said, his voice cold. "Sign the papers, drop the investigation, or accept the consequences. One less mouth to feed won't keep me up at night." Marlowe suddenly went still, his head swinging toward Maddox. A low growl rumbled in the dog's chest, no longer the trained medical alert, but something primitive and protective. That split second of divided attention was all Lyle needed. He lunged for his car, hands finding the medical bag by touch. The tranquilizer gun was right where he'd left it, loaded and ready. Behind him, Maddox shouted. Marlowe's growl rose to a snarl, and somewhere in the darkness, engine sounds grew louder, carrying the promise of either rescue or reinforcement. Abel's life ticked away with each passing heartbeat, while Lyle's fingers closed around both salvation and defense, insulin in one hand, tranquilizer gun in the other. The next few seconds would determine everything. Maddox's expression twisted with desperate rage. He lunged for his truck, engine roaring to life. The headlights swung wildly as he cranked the wheel, aiming straight for Lyle's vehicle near the quarry's edge. "If I'm going down," he screamed through the open window, "you're all coming with me." The truck accelerated, metal groaning as it slammed into Lyle's car. Rock crumbled beneath the tires, sending pebbles cascading into the dark void below. Lyle clutched Abel with one arm, the tranquilizer gun steady in his other hand. He had one shot. The dart found its mark in Maddox's shoulder just as Harlan's vehicle skidded onto the scene. The retired trooper moved with practiced efficiency, yanking the getaway driver from his seat before the man could react. Maddox stumbled from his truck, the sedative already taking effect. His foot caught the crumbling edge, and he pitched backward toward the precipice. Without hesitation, Lyle lunged forward, grabbing Maddox's wrist. The corrupt director dangled over the abyss, his eyes wide with fear. For one heartbeat, Lyle felt the weight of choice, justice, or vengeance. He thought of Abel, of Marlowe, of all the lives Maddox had threatened. Then he pulled, muscles straining as he hauled his enemy back to solid ground. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Harlan secured Maddox with zip ties, while Lyle finally reached his medical bag. Through it all, Marlowe maintained his alert position, nose pressed to Abel's chest, only relaxing when the boy's glucose levels stabilized after treatment. Red and blue lights flooded the quarry as police units arrived. Lyle held his son close, watching as officers led Maddox away. The choice to save rather than destroy had cost nothing but pride, and gained everything that mattered. The weeks following the quarry confrontation unfolded with deliberate precision. In the county courthouse, Clint Maddox sat stone-faced as the judge read out a string of convictions: arson, fraud, animal cruelty, and attempted murder. His carefully constructed facade of bureaucratic authority crumbled under the weight of evidence. The most powerful testimony came from Evangeline Kerr, who walked into court with visible scars but unwavering determination. Her voice steady, she identified Marlowe as her program's star graduate. "He was our most reliable alert dog," she testified, pointing to detailed training logs. The dangerous label was pure fiction. Documents revealed a pattern of falsified records, trained medical alert dogs vanishing into a system designed to silence them. Each paper trail led back to Maddox's office, each falsified, dangerous designation hiding a valuable service animal. At the rebuilt clinic, Lyle implemented changes without fanfare. Glass-walled examination rooms replaced opaque ones. Every procedure was logged in detail, every record accessible. Marlowe became a fixture, his alert vest identifying him as both guardian and symbol of transparency. Romy maintained meticulous files while Harlan's quiet presence discouraged any lingering trouble. Evangeline visited regularly, helping train new alert dogs while watching Marlowe work with pride. The court granted Lyle permanent guardianship, formalizing what they'd all known since that first day. Marlowe was exactly where he belonged. Around them, the community healed and adapted. Trust rebuilt slowly, like the clinic's new walls, stronger for having been tested. Justice had prevailed not through speeches or declarations, but through the patient accumulation of truth and the unwavering loyalty of those who defended it. The morning sun painted the clinic's lawn in gentle golden hues. Dew sparkled on the fresh grass, making everything look new and clean. Abel, now steady on his chubby legs, took wobbly steps across the yard. His pale blonde curls caught the light, creating a halo effect around his small head. Marlowe moved like a shadow behind the toddler, his burnished coat gleaming. Every few steps, the shepherd mix would pause, nose twitching, assessing Abel's condition with the precision of a medical instrument wrapped in fur. When Abel stumbled slightly, Marlowe was there instantly, his solid body providing a steady support for the little boy to right himself. From the clinic's front porch, Lyle watched them with misty eyes, his heart squeezed with a familiar ache, not of fear this time, but of overwhelming gratitude. In the quiet of his mind, he made a solemn promise. As long as he drew breath, he would protect this extraordinary dog who had saved his son's life not once, but 3 times. The clinic itself stood as a testament to renewal. Fresh paint covered the scars of the arson attack, and new windows reflected the morning light. But the real transformation wasn't in the building. It was in the home they'd created within it. The upstairs apartment, once a place of lonely vigilance, now rang with Abel's laughter and the click of Marlowe's protective pacing. Tears welled in Lyle's eyes as he watched his son play. These weren't the desperate tears of that first night when Marlowe had alerted him to Abel's crisis, nor the terrified tears at the quarry. These were tears of pure thankfulness, of a father's heart learning to beat normally again after too long holding its breath. "Marlowe, Marlowe!" Abel called out, his childish pronunciation missing the W as he reached for his furry guardian. Marlowe responded immediately, moving close enough for Abel to wrap his small arms around the dog's neck. The shepherd mix lowered his head gently, offering a soft, careful hug that spoke of both protection and affection. Abel's delighted squeal pierced the morning air, pure, uncomplicated joy from a child who felt completely safe. Marlowe's tail wagged slowly, his eyes remaining alert even in this tender moment, ever watchful for any sign that his young charge might need him. This was their victory, not the headlines about Maddox's conviction or the praise from the medical alert dog community. Their triumph was in these quiet moments, in the trust that had replaced fear, in the sense of purpose that had overcome suspicion. This was their new beginning, simple, hard-earned, and deeply personal. Thanks for watching. If any part of this story lingered with you, consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.